Hello, everyone, and many thanks for joining us on our latest investment video. Today's topic is a bit different to the norm, but is viewed by many as possibly one of the most important investment trends in the world today: medical grade cannabis. To find out more, I have the huge pleasure in talking to David Barfoot, director at Rize ETF, who will no doubt guide us through the investment opportunity. But before we start, it would be wonderful if you could subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. It really does help us with the support of the channel and delivering our weekly content on all things investment and financial planning. But let's get cracked on. David, it's great to see you once again. Many thanks for your time today. Everyone's tuning in for this. There's not that many medical grade cannabis investment videos out in the marketplace. So what is the investment opportunity? And is this truly a long-term megatrend?
Andrew, thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Three Counties, for having us again. It's been your support is wonderful. Thank you. Medical cannabis, we're smiling because I think a lot of people find this a very controversial investment area, but in fact, we don't think it is. And I think before we get into talking about what the investment opportunity is, I think it's worth just explaining first and foremost what is medical cannabis and how does it differ to what people think is the controversial side of cannabis, which is the stuff that you smoke and stuff. So essentially, with cannabis, the same as you get with opioids, cannabis are cannabinoids, and there's hundreds of cannabinoids that you can access through different types of plants that all fall into that cannabis sphere. What makes it the stuff that we're buying legal is we're investing into the cannabinoid, which is called CBD, right. Which is cannabis oil. Now the stuff that's illegal, which is the cannabis that you can get from the streets and you smoke, and if you go to Amsterdam, you could have a very fun time. That's got something called THC in it, and that's the psychosis part of the drug. Right. We simply can't invest into that. And if you're a UK investor and any company had exposure to revenues in that type of drug, THC, then that's illegal, and you're breaking the law as a UK investor buying it. But the plant that we're investing in and the medical side of it is called CBD. And lots of your clients would have seen that you can access lots of different goods, such as oil, CBD oil, which helps anxiety and bits and pieces like that. And that's non-psychosis. So every company that we invest in, and when we're talking about medical cannabis and talking about hemp, has very low THC. In fact, it has less than 0.3%. Of THC in the good for us to be able to invest into that company. Yeah. So the plant that we're buying, the plant that we're investing in, is completely legal, and all the goods that are associated to that are completely legal. And I think a lot of people don't understand the differences between the two. Now, what CBD is bringing to the industry, into the market, is the amount, the versatility you get from that particular plant, it is absolutely phenomenal. And in the medical side of it, we're seeing drugs being designed and built by major pharmaceuticals, but also smaller pharmaceuticals and biotech companies, which are really helping lots of different afflictions that people might have medically. Yeah. This is only just becoming a thing. If you go back if you look over into the United States, opioid addiction is a real problem there, and it's a real social issue. And many people here are prescribed opioids in the form of things like morphine, and it's quite addictive. It's very addictive. It's a very addictive drug, and what we're seeing stateside is a real social issue there, and there's lots of states. I think it is Pennsylvania in one point, in which there's 40% of adults are now addicted to opioids in one way, shape, or form, and that's not good. And as a pain relief and as a painkiller, cannabinoids is an absolutely valid substitute, and in fact, in some cases, it's a better substitute than opioids. And just from that alone, we're seeing huge demand in the space. And as I say, this is only just started to be developed over the last few years, It's now becoming more mainstream. We can talk about that and why it's becoming mainstream on this call. But what we're seeing at the moment is huge growth in the cannabis space, and we expect that to continue. And over the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to become much more mainstream. I expect a lot of your listeners and clients are already seeing this from their own GPs. They're seeing it in shops. They're being prescribed cannabis. Cancer patients are being prescribed it. It's a great painkiller. It helps things like epilepsy. It helps lots of conditions like anxiety, arthritis, insomnia, Huntington's disease, PTSD. They're looking at it to see how it helps Parkinson's. So there's many different uses for cannabis. And that's without talking about the non-medical side, which we can get onto as well, because there's another derivative from it, and that's called hemp. Hemp is the actual plant and what you can make from the plant itself. And that again, we can come on to that. There's many uses. In fact, there's something like 25,000 different products can be made from hemp.
Yeah, that's huge.
So that from a supply point of view, and there's lots of different angles and avenues that you can go down to use the cannabis plant.
Yeah. So you guys at Rise, you've created an ETF that allows investors in the UK to invest, expose their portfolios to this theme. How do you go about it?
So what we do at Rise, and as you know, with all of our products, we custom build our index, and then we replicate the index with the ETF. So we've got a very active element of selecting companies at the index level. For cannabis itself, we've signed up with a company called New Frontier Data, NFD for short, and I'll call them that in future. Now, NFD are based in Washington, DC. They're the leading cannabis analysts company globally, and they know everything about cannabis, and that includes recreational cannabis. So that THC that I mentioned earlier, we can classify that as recreational or adult use cannabis. And then CBD, that I mentioned earlier, is the stuff that we invest in. We can class that as medical use or hemp or CBD products. Now, so what their NFD's job is to identify which companies are cannabis companies, and then to analyze their revenues to understand where the revenues come from. Is it from THC products? Is it from CBD? Now, all the ETFs that you get stateside, or any company that you get stateside, will also have exposure to recreational cannabis. They're allowed to do that. Right. As I said earlier, as a UK investor, you can't invest in any companies that have exposure to recreational or adult use cannabis. So what NFD do for us, they build the portfolio to only have exposure to medical grade cannabis. So we've split our index into 4 sections, which is big pharmaceuticals, biotech, hemp and CBD products and companies that distribute those products, and then agriculture tech. And they're the 4 main sectors that we invest into our product.
And so just to let investors know, you essentially create the active the index on a very much an active approach, and then create a passive ETF vehicle in order to access that. In terms of how you select the funds, what are there any kind of major considerations for what can go in and what can't? Is it just do you deal in CBD, or is there anything else that goes into that?
I mean, so if you go back to the sectors, biotech, hemp, big pharma, ag tech, big pharma we've limited to 10%. So because we've got control over the index, we can then control the rules that go into that index, and therefore the ETF. The ETF is just a wrapper for the index. For an active fund, you obviously don't have to follow an index. We follow an index. That's the difference. But we make sure that within the index that we have full control over that. Now, for each of those 4 elements, we can invest into any company that we deem have revenues exposed to those 4 areas. So that's big pharma, biotech, hemp, and agriculture. Now, agriculture is quite broad. So you have to, what NFD's job to do is to identify the revenues exposed to agriculture is the cannabis industry only. So all the revenues that we have and every company that we have within the index have exposure to cannabis revenues, but medical grade cannabis and not adult use or recreational cannabis. And then so within that, there's lots of different types of companies. We've got a company in hemp and CBD, for example, called Ecofiber, who are an Australian company. So this is a global equity portfolio, by the way. This is not, a lot of people see it as American or Canadian companies because they led the way when it comes to cannabis companies. We'll come back to America because it's very important at the moment what's going on in this space because the Americans are driving it. However, cannabis and medical cannabis is legal. Medical cannabis is legal in over 70 countries now in the globe. So that's also driving demand. This is not a new fad thing. The UK legalized medical cannabis back in 2018. Not many people know that. Obviously, recreational cannabis is still illegal, and it is illegal in many countries. But that's looking to change in America. Going back to my point, I digress there. Ecofiber are a company that one of our fastest growing companies in our product. They're an Australian t-shirt manufacturer.
Wow.
Now you can make t-shirts from hemp and you can make materials and it's a lighter version of other materials. So hemp products are going into a lot of things like cars because it's, you can cover seats using hemp fiber and it's much lighter than current materials. So also what you get there, you're growing the plant's bringing in carbon dioxide, same as any plant would do. And so that's trapping the carbon dioxide. That then goes into a product such as a t-shirt. And then so from a carbon neutral point of view, this plant is also extremely beneficial to many economies and the globe. So, and we're seeing that happening in America at the moment. Again, that's one of the things that's driving the demand in cannabis right now.
I think one of the big takeaways for me personally, working with you guys over the past few months, is the focus upon the revenue stream and the purity of the revenue stream in order to access the trend itself. That's very important and obviously crucial if you're investing in themes itself. Just want to touch on what you said about the developments across the globe. We have seen a significant ramp up in the performance of cannabis stocks, certainly in the performance recently of your ETF itself. What's driving that?
I mean, well, quite simply, it's Joe Biden coming into power. And if you look at almost like the week he won the election, cannabis stocks started to increase quite rapidly. And we've seen huge growth in our portfolio. Apologies, my phone started to ring.
We're all at home. I'm quite surprised my dog hasn't jumped through the door, to be perfectly honest. There's no worries at all.
So why is that? So Biden is much more open to cannabis. In America, there's 32 states that have legalized medical cannabis already out of the 50 states. There's only about 12 that legalize recreational cannabis, but that includes big states such as California. And the revenues that they're getting from cannabis legalization is quite vast. That's been noted at the federal level. So from a legal point of view and from a social point of view, again, I mentioned about things such as opioid addiction there stateside. Cannabinoids is becoming a real alternative to the market. And actually from the recreational side of it, the adult use, what is illegal here in the UK, that may well become legal at federal level this year, and we think it will become legal at both federal level, that medical cannabis certainly, but also recreational cannabis, and that's a game changer for the cannabis industry. Joe Biden's administration is much more open to that, and whereas the previous administration was not. They were very disruptive for the cannabis industry. No one knew whether or not they should be investing into it. All the shackles are off of that now, so investment's going to come in quite rapidly into the market. The second point of that is Biden's got a climate plan. In America, they want to achieve zero emissions by 2050, and they've got a $5 trillion spend to achieve that. Now, how do they do that? One of the areas of doing that is agriculture. It's things like farms bringing in the carbon dioxide, photosynthesis that you get from many plants. The great thing about these hemp plants and these CBD plants is that they can grow anywhere. And if you've got any farmers listening, or if you want to grow a crop, a high quality crop, then the soil needs to be of a certain level of nutrients, etc., etc. Cannabis doesn't need that. Like, it literally can grow in anything. And there's loads of in America. There's lots of land where they just can't use it at the moment to grow crop. So they can now use that. Cannabis is a very valid plant that they can use, and it will help combat. And it's one of the plants that have been listed to help combat climate change, and will help Biden achieve his zero emissions by 2050. I think with that sort of push demand and the pull that we're seeing from clients that want the drugs that come from it. When I say the drugs, I mean the medical drugs.
Yeah.
Then I think there's a real impetus to legalize this drug, cannabis, by the end of this year in the States. And I think once you see the Americans do it, other countries will follow suit.
Do you think, just to finalise, do you think it's realistic that it could happen in the UK, or is it the case of wait and see and see the kind of revenue benefits and fiscal benefits of what happens in the States?
I think, as I say, medical cannabis is legalised already. What we've seen recently in the UK is the FCA last September, they put out a note to say that any company now, any medical cannabis company, so long as they get Home Office approval, can now list on the LSE, on the London Stock Exchange.
Right.
Before September, they weren't able to do that. So there's a company called GW Pharmaceuticals. Yeah. They're a UK-based pharmaceutical company that specialises in cannabis drugs. And they've had huge success in a drug called Epidiolex, which is being distributed worldwide. And it's a cannabis drug that really helps childhood epilepsy, and it reduces seizures quite dramatically. There's certain epilepsy where you can have up to 100 seizures a day, and this drug helps reduce that. So those poor kids, they've now got a drug which has come from cannabis that helps solve that for them. GW Pharma had to list in America. They're a UK business that had to list in America. They've recently just been taken over by a large American pharmaceutical business called Jazz Pharmaceuticals. So we're starting also to see M&A activity in the space. But the FCA have now, if GW Pharma listed now, they would be able to list on the London Stock Exchange. They wouldn't have been able to do that pre-September last year.
Gotcha.
So we're starting to see moves here in the UK that, they're starting to realise that actually this is a very valid legal product that you as an investor can invest in.
Yeah.
Whether they go down the recreational adult use space will remain to be seen. I think that will be another few years out yet here in the UK.
Yeah.
But for medical cannabis, then we're already seeing 2 or 3 companies have listed already this year on the LSE. One Israeli company, so it doesn't have to be a UK business. One Israeli company's just listed this year, but it has to have their revenues associated to CBD only.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, it could happen. It absolutely could happen. We do expect across the world much more liberalization when it comes to cannabis, not only medical cannabis, but recreational cannabis as well.
Wow, that's great. Thanks very much, David. I think for me, two main takeaways. First of all, with regards to the theme itself, it is a genuine global megatrend. It solves problems, be it medical problems, be it agricultural problems, be it the climate change. It assists in that, and so therefore it's multifaceted. But then also moving on, and I touched on it earlier with regards to the Rize ETF, the purity of the revenue stream is absolutely crucial in order to access the theme in absolutely the correct manner. So thanks very much, David, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure again, as usual. You take care, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.